thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion on Growing Together, discussing the Iowa-Japan agricultural relationship. My name is Amy Gamer, and I'm a programs manager at the East West Center in Washington, where I manage our Asia Matters for America initiative. I'm delighted to be in Iowa today to talk about our Japan Matters for America program and to continue our Japan Matters for America roadshows. These roadshows have been made possible through the support of the Embassy of Japan. Before we start, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Ambassador Shigeo Yamada for the continued partnership, as well as Tomoko Nakamura for her continued work on this project. Before I turn things over to our expert panel, let me take a moment to give a brief introduction to the East West Center and to our Asia Matters for America initiative. The East West Center was established by an act of Congress in 1960, and for the last 60 years we have served as a U.S.-based institution for public diplomacy in the Indo-Pacific region, focused on cooperative study, research, and dialogue. Our main offices are located on our 21-acre campus in Honolulu, Hawaii. We're right next to the University of Hawaii in Manoa. We also have an office in Washington, D.C., where my colleagues and I have come from today. We host a range of programs between our two offices around and around the world, which is led by a network of approximately 70,000 alumni and over 1,000 partner organizations worldwide. The Asia Matters for America initiative is grown out of our Washington, D.C. office as a way to map trade, investment, security, people-to-people connections, and more between the United States and Asia at the national, state, and local levels. This initiative covers 11 different bilateral and multilateral relationships, which includes our Japan Matters for America program. In your folders today, you can find our 4th edition of Japan Matters for America, American Matters for Japan, as well as a one-pager highlighting the Iowa-Japan connections at a state and local level. For anyone viewing this program from online, you can find these publications and one-pagers at our Asia Matters for America website. We've brought the Japan Matters program to Des Moines and the Borlaug Dialogue today to highlight these state and local level connections, specifically the unique agricultural relationship Iowa shares with Japan. This relationship brings together two regions, both rich with agricultural traditions, and a shared commitment to agricultural innovation and sustainability. This relationship is fueled by people-to-people connections, which have built the ties between citizens, businesses, local governments, through trade missions, educational programs, and personal travels. A prime example of these relationships can be found in the sister state partnership between Yamanashi Prefecture and the state of Iowa, which has come to fruition after a goodwill agricultural exchange initiated by local Iowa resident Sergeant Richard Thomas. When Yamanashi was hit with a devastating typhoon in 1959, Sergeant Thomas, who had spent time traveling in the prefecture, quickly organized aid delivery, which included 35 breeding hogs and 100,000 bushels of corn. This act sent into motion a relationship between Iowa and Yamanashi, which has spanned over 60 years. The original hogs sent in 1959 have been bred with breeds in Yamanashi, whose offspring now contribute to the thriving pork industry in the prefecture. Our panel today comes from a range of backgrounds that all share similarly unique connections with Japan. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage today our moderator, Zoe Weaver, and our panelists. So we can turn it over to you.
Please.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I know this seems like a niche topic, but the more we researched for this panel, the more we realized just how deep the connections between Iowa and Japan go. So I hope our panelists today can shed some light on what that really looks like. So joining us for the discussion today are 3 distinguished panelists. You all have their biographies in your folders, so I won't go into depth with their backgrounds. But just a brief introduction, we have Dr. Greiner, who currently serves as the undergraduate teaching professor for swine production classes at Iowa State University, just to my left. Kimberley on the end, who is the executive director of the Iowa Biodiesel Board and also serves as the Iowa Soybean Association Director of Market Development. And in the middle there is Rebecca Ahrendsen, serves as the Market Development Manager for the Iowa Corn Growers Association and Iowa Corn Promotion Board. So thank you all so much for joining us here today. So like I said, and like Amy mentioned off the top, very diverse background, but one thing in common, which is a connection somehow to Japan. So I'd like to just start off the panel by maybe having each of you share a little bit about your work your recent connections with Japan and how that plays into the work you do in relevant institutions.
So I can start. So I'm currently a professor at Iowa State University. But prior to coming back to Iowa State about 6 years ago, I worked in the swine industry with a production company. And within that production company, we would have veterinarians from Japan come over. And while they were working on their advanced degrees here, they would spend time in our production system, learning more about our practices and how we trained our team. And in addition to that, we would have practicing swine veterinarians from Japan come over a couple times a year to visit with us again to learn more about our research and some of the activities that we were doing. More recently, since I've been back at Iowa State, I've led a group of students over to Japan and Thailand in May. And so that is a study abroad course that our department offers. We used to offer it quite regularly before COVID. And then when my predecessor retired and I came on, it's taken a few years before Japan opened up its borders again. And since then, we took 24 students over where we were able to meet with individuals from U.S. grains, U.S. meat export, as well as work with production companies that are in Japan. We toured harvesting facilities. We met with mayors of cities and learned about agriculture and what was important to them. And we also had a chance to go to the Yamanashi prefecture and work with the researchers there. And they were also with us actually in March and April before we went over. So they were at Iowa State learning from us, and we had a chance to go see them back in their home area.
That's great. Thank you so much, Becca.
Yeah, so I know Lauren kind of touched on it, but U.S. Grains Council, USMEF, we work in tandem with them quite a bit at Iowa Corn. So recently in June, we had one of our farmers go to a ethanol-based event over there and really was driving home the message of E10, trying to really push that initiative over there. So his name is Dan Kaiser. I can pass on his information if you ever need that. He's the ethanol expert. And then most recently in September, we had one of our hog producers and corn producers travel to Japan with USMEF. Obviously, they are one of our top exporters or importers of corn and corn coated products, VGs. So he was able to see hog production over there and really drive home the message of Iowa corn and Iowa corn production. So he was able to go to different supermarkets, and we had our branding there, and he was able to take a lot of cool pictures of how our Iowa corn message is being brought over to Japan. So definitely have a farmer touch base, and I'm sure Grant will touch on that too. So thank you.
Thank you. Very specific example.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Grant Kimberley, and work on behalf of Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. And our connection to Japan is a long one as an industry. The U.S. soybean industry has been working in Japan at various levels since actually 1956. And look back, the first one of the first U.S. soy cooperation projects they did was in Japan in 1956. So there's been a long-standing relationship there, and the reason being is it's certainly a sophisticated market, a very important market when it comes to demand for soy products. Japan is the world's fifth largest purchaser or importer of soybeans and soybean products. The U.S. soy industry does well in Japan because Japan understands the value that U.S. soy can bring through its consistency, high quality, reliability, a reliable supplier. We have about 75% market share when it comes to the amount of soybeans that Japan imports. The U.S. industry captures about 75% of that. On the soybean meal side, it's a little bit lower. It's probably in the 20 to 25% range. There's more competition in the world when it comes to global supplies of processed soybean meal, especially from places in South America that have other programs and subsidy issues. That's another story, trade issues. But it's the Japan market with the hog industry there, the poultry industry, of course, the food sector that's still growing. Soy is a direct to consumer human food product. especially varieties, some of them grown in Iowa and other parts of the Midwest, as we talked about earlier. All those are very important to diversify our market base as a soy industry. And on a side note, I should say we've sent delegations there many times. We have another delegation going, and I assume Iowa Corn probably would as well, here later on in the month of November, before Thanksgiving holiday. An Iowa agriculture delegation led by the Iowa Economic Development Authority will be going to Japan again, along with soy, corn, and beef and pork representatives in the state. And then another thing is I've served on the Iowa Sister States Board, and of course Iowa and Yamanashi, we talked about having this long-standing sister state relationship that started way back in the 1959, 1960 time frame with the hog lift when they were devastated by 2 typhoons back to back, I think within a month's period of time. And Iowa farmers stepped up, as they always are willing to do, and provided an opportunity to help get the U.S. or get the Japanese hog industry back on its feet, send over corn and other feed at that time. And a lot of the genetics in the hog sector there today, I think, has some relationship back to those original 35 hogs, I think, that were sent there. So anyway, it's just an interesting, fascinating story, and this long-standing relationship and cultural relationship and friendship that Iowa and Japan have had over many years.
Great, thank you so much, all of you, for all of your excellent work and just illustrating for us the different ways in which Iowa engages with Japan for so long. And one of the things I really realized as a commonality amongst each of you is that there's such a complex matrix of relationships that make these types of things happen. So from your standpoint, why do you think is it that, why Japan? Why does Iowa and Japan have such a close connection, either from a historical standpoint or from the standpoint of, say, your students? Why Japan? Is that interesting? Is that a pull for you? So if you should take a step at that, would be great.
And certainly from my perspective, and it's been alluded to, when we think about the pork industry as a whole, 27% of our product is exported, and Japan is our primary country that we import high quality product to. And so when we think about Japan, and we talk to the students, particularly about countries where our product is going, they're very intrigued by, well, what does that mean, the high quality product, and how does Japan use that? You know, what does it look like in terms of dishes and culture? And as we know, food generally relates to a lot of things in everybody's cultures, and so how does that tie in? So for them, some of it is too, they recognize that they probably will never get to go to Japan on their own. So we go and we get to experience this in a very fun way. And so they really enjoy those relationships. A lot of them now have a network there. Some of our translators are actually back in Iowa State right now doing advanced degrees, so our students see them in the hallways, and there's just this fun relationship. So for us, there's obviously the business component, but one of the things I think our students recognized in these conversations and meeting with people in Japan is how gracious the Japanese individuals are. They're very welcoming. They're always willing to share, and I think we see that too when we talk about Iowa Nice. And so there's just this really open, fluid conversation that happens when we're together, and this just excitement about what we're doing and how we can all network. So that's, I think, where the intrigue is for our students. One, to learn more about how product that they're raising here in the U.S. is being used in Japan. They're also intrigued about how other countries are raising animals similar to what they're doing. And then, of course, just that cultural relationship and friendship that they can create.
Great answer. I would say, when I think of Japan and I think comparing that with Iowa and how that relationship kind of coincides, one thing that really comes to mind is pride. I think in Iowa, we take very much so pride in our farming families, our farming communities, whether that's through pork, corn, soybeans. The people that are behind the product, that are growing the corn, producing the hogs, they take such great pride in what they do each and every day. And I know that when we've had farmers go over to Japan, they talk about just how beautiful and how cleanly and just how high quality everything is. So seeing how that pride kind of coincides from country to country, I think is very, very unique and something we share culturally. So I just know that that's of great importance to the people of Japan, but also the people that are also making the product here in the United States.
You know, I think you guys have pretty much answered it. So, I mean, just to add on to that, the only thing I could say why it's been such a successful relationship over the years is as both the U.S. and the Japanese recognize quality. And I think when we talk about in terms of the industry standpoint, that's something we talk about from the U.S. soy sector, and I'm sure our entire agriculture chain, that the U.S. industry is going to provide high quality, safe, sustainable, affordable food to the world. And our farmers take pride into feeding the world. And Japanese, understand that, they embrace that. We're in a commodity business when it comes to agriculture. If you can understand that there is differences in quality from different sourcing products from different parts of the world, and you're going to get that reliability, you're going to get the sustainability aspects, you're going to get the servicing side of that. That's why we have an office, and we've had a long-standing physical footprint in Japan for many years because our people are there on the ground working with the industry in Japan and building that relationship. And then the connection all has our farmers. And the Japanese industry likes to understand how our crops are grown, how we store them, how we transport, and just the quality of those things and those relationships that we can have through the exchanges is very important. That builds that trust and that understanding and that comfort level that they're getting something that's going to be good for their consumers as well.
Excellent, all excellent points. And I'd like to pick up on one thing you mentioned, which is trust, right? Which takes a long time to develop, and I've heard from many of the states that we visited on the roadshow, a commonality is we felt like we weren't getting anywhere with our Japanese partners until we really felt like we established trust, which goes both ways. So on top of that, on top of all this overview that you've given, I'd love to know from your standpoint, what are some opportunities in the Iowa-Japan agricultural relationship that you feel maybe have not been thoroughly explored or that you see on the horizon? Is there anything that comes to mind when you think of opportunities with Iowa-Japan?
I think from the E10, the ethanol perspective, I think there's immense opportunity there for that to be a consideration. I know that sustainability and all the different things that go into putting that into your gasoline is of importance in Japan and all across our other global importers of ethanol. But I think if we can kind of bridge that gap a little bit there, that would be huge. But also from just the meat side, we know that Japan is very, very, they value that high quality and they're very, very capable of winning more of that. So expanding that market as well. But definitely the potential of maybe the biofuel space, I can see that built off of initial trust.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on it, Great?
I think one of the things that we saw, at least when we were talking to fellow swine producers in Japan, was just that continuing of having open conversation, open dialogue. And so, for example, when we went, they were very gracious. They opened up their business to our students and they talked about it. But our conversation back was, you're spending a day to a day and a half with us. What can we do for you? And so our students in return spent 2 hours talking to them about, here's U.S. pork, here are the challenges, here's what's going on, here's some production practices. And when we ended that conversation, that was what we gathered from the president of the company, was how grateful he was that we were willing to share that. And so I think that goes back to just continuing to have the open conversation, to be willing to share both directions, and that continues to keep that trust in place. But that is something that we heard routinely was, what are you willing to share and what can you tell us? And as long as we're willing to not try to hide things behind curtains, it does help keep those relationships in place.
Great, any additional comments?
Well, I guess we're in an era now where everything's centered around the term about carbon, reducing carbon emissions, carbon in the environment. And I think as agriculture, we have a role to play, and our power plant have a role in being a carbon sink, where we can sequester that carbon back into the soil out of the atmosphere. Our crops are grown that way, and we have more. We've been implementing more sustainable production practices over time, like cover crops and no-till and minimum till and things like that. That's reducing that kind of thing, and that's important to a lot of the sophisticated consumers and customers and buyers that we work with around the world, especially a place like Japan, who understands that value, and that's something that we can talk about that's different than maybe the way some agriculture is done in other parts of the world, and utilizing technology and education to help make those improvements. And so I think we continue to communicate that message and help our partners understand that. And we have a thing in the soy industry we call the U.S. Soybean Sustainability Assurance Protocol, SSAP for easier lingo, and that's a way that we've validated through a lot of the international validation systems that U.S. soy is sustainably produced, and when we export, exporters can go through that and they certify, and basically that shipment can go with a certificate. The buyer in an overseas market can purchase or can have that certificate as part of the purchase agreement. And then they can turn around and use a logo labeling efforts when they turn around and maybe market it to their feed customer or their food customer. And that's been helpful, and it's something that the Japanese market has been one of the leaders in that area, in that space. And so we've been working together to further the goals for both of our markets and our countries when it comes to that.
Excellent, thank you all so much. I do have a couple more questions for our panelists up here, but I would like to open the floor to you as well after I ask these questions. We will be having a brief Q&A session, so be thinking of some questions that you'd like to ask the panelists. We'll have a mic coming around as well. But before we do that, since we've talked opportunities, I think it's only fair to also talk challenges. If you're able to speak on it, if there's something that you'd like to shed light, what are some things maybe that you foresee in the future as a challenge in the Iowa-Japan relationship? And if you foresee any solutions to what those challenges might be.
I would say a challenge is big picture. Maybe this isn't super specific to Japan, but from the corn side and soy as well, we had a stellar harvest this last year, which we are so blessed and so grateful to have in Iowa, but that also comes with the added challenge of where are we gonna get it or bring this product or import this or export this product to. So that really causes a supply chain type issue. So definitely have that coming through the pipe of, hey, if you need more corn and soybeans, we've got plenty of it coming down the pipe. But it definitely causes a little bit of pressure here on the state side to be like, okay, where are those new markets and different markets that we can utilize at this time?
That's great, and I think a very common issue among many industries as well, supply chain issues. Yeah. Any additional thoughts? Yeah.
Maybe I'll step in here real quick on this. Challenge we've seen, and this is something that's happened a little bit over time in the Japanese market. The Japanese market used to be they were one of the bigger crushing markets. Crushing, when I talk about crushing, they had internal soy processing capacity. They buy the soybean, they process and make meal and oil and the various components that can come off from that. That industry has been contracting a little bit in Japan over time, partly because of competition from places like China and other parts of Southeast Asia. That's also seen an increase in soy crushing capacity, and therefore more soybean meal primarily has been readily available to that East Asia market at a cheaper price from some of those processors relative in the past. Japan processors not only supply their own market, they would then turn around and export a little bit of the processed product to other markets and other parts of that East Asia region. So there's been a little contraction there on some of those things. And ultimately, from an agriculture standpoint, just thinking about a little bit of an older contracting population base that can create some, the demand in Japan is not necessarily growing. It's more stable, more mature, what we term a mature market. And so, as we continue to grow more corn and soybeans, it seems like more, on the same amount of acreage, quite frankly, where the productivity continues to increase in agriculture, we have extra supplies to and we can't use it all here in Iowa, so we have extra supplies in the world market. That's the challenge. We need more growing markets around the world. We value very much our mature markets, and we want to continue to maximize those relationships. But challenges of just growing those markets is in Japan and other parts of the world, we see that happen too.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's,
Say it better than I did.
I don't know if I can, but the protein sector for us, when we think of that, and certainly what we see in Japan is that it's somewhat flattening, and certainly the consumption of pork in particular is maybe not increasing as much. And so it's not, I would say, unique to Japan. It's happening in the US, it's happening globally. So how do we continue as we provide product? How do we continue to compete with others that maybe are also trying to bring product into Japan? That'll be something that we see as a challenge. Also, from an animal agriculture perspective, we have some disease. We don't have some diseases in this country yet that we'd like to keep out, because those can certainly alter our relationship in terms of exporting product. And Japan's already dealing with one of the two that we're trying to manage to keep away. But I do see that those things can always be a challenge as we go forward, as we continue to try to work on those exports.
All great points, all great points. I'd like to ask one kind of final thought question before I turn to our audience here. Kind of the obligatory, because our program is called Japan Matters for America. So I'd like to ask you all, from your standpoint, why do you think Japan matters for America? Maybe even specifically for Iowa, if you'd like to share that. We find that when we collect our data, we do everything from exchanges, investment, tourist spending, entrepreneurship. So out of all those aspects, if an average Iowan were to ask you, why should Japan matter for me? What kind of insights would you have?
I mean, for us, from the swine sector, I can do that one very easily, because we've already talked about, right? We export a large amount of product there. If we think about swine in Iowa in particular, swine is one of the leading agribusinesses or agri-commodities that we have. And so when we have more pigs than we do people in the state, it should matter. It should matter to the people here, because it is providing jobs for people. It's providing taxes to provide for schools and roads and everything else that we need just by selling our animals and the protein that they produce. And so Japan should matter from that aspect. But certainly, when we did travel in Japan, there's a lot of technology that's happening there that does matter. It should matter as we bring it over to the US, because there's a lot of opportunity for advancement. And we certainly talk about labor challenges as we go through, whether it's here or there. Labor is an issue. And so having the ability to bring in technology that can help with that through robots and some of what they're doing even in agriculture. We didn't tour it, but there's a farm over there who uses robots to gather tomatoes, and so you don't have to use people all the time. So how do we bring that technology to the US? It matters, right? So I definitely see that there's a lot of opportunity here within the state of Iowa.
And that was a good answer. I would just say, to build off of that, we talked a lot about the hog lift, just our initial relationship from the start, how that started with a lot of humility and wanting to help out your fellow neighbor, essentially. And so I think that just building upon that, just having that importance is so great, and something I would say to not only an Iowan, but citizen of the U.S. too. So just building upon that, obviously we know the top 3 market for us when it comes to corn co-products and corn-fed meat. So we recognize that it is a big and important market, but also, I know I hit on this before, but just that pride. I know that the Japanese people have such pride in their country and taking care of their cities, their country as a whole, and that's the same thing for us as Iowans, and I feel like citizens in the U.S. too, especially our farming families, whether it's you're a hog farmer, you're a corn farmer, a soy farmer. I think we just all take great pride, so that relationship is really synopsis.
I guess the only other thing to say is that to the average American, why it matters, if you want to take a really big picture view of the world, it's Japan and the U.S. have very more similar, I would say, goals and ideals, market-based economies, rule of law, so to speak, and fair trading-based systems and so forth. And it's important to maintain that structure around the world, whether it's through Japan being kind of the anchor of Asia, I would say, when it comes to those kinds of concepts, as well as, I suppose, South Korea as well. We've had a long-standing relationship since, of course, World War II, and then since then, things changed dramatically. And so looking at it from a very big global perspective picture, the goals and ideals are more aligned, or similar, I'd say, between the United States and Japan, and having those partnerships around the world, and Japan being in the center of the Asia region, is really important to maintain that strong relationship for lots of different kinds of reasons like that.
Well, thank you all for giving us talking points for our next publication. So I'd like to turn now to the audience. If we have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to ask. I do believe we have a microphone coming around too. Yes, this one with the laser here.
Thank you for having this panel. This is very interesting. Are the farmers in Japan experiencing issues such as we're hearing about in this conference, like with climate change, the difficulties with raising particular foods? Are they experiencing those types of challenges? And then I also have a comment, I'm just going to say this now. I think another thing or another aspect to look at as a contribution or what Japan can offer the United States is education. The education systems are a little different, and I think that's a plus, as far as something that can impact American culture.
Yes.
But,
Thank you so much. Excellent question and excellent comment. Any responses to that question about challenges that Japan is facing that are shared challenges here?
Certainly they are aware of global climate change. That is an issue that they're dealing with as well. Japan doesn't have a large footprint, and so their tillable or usable land for crops and other types of food products is limited. And so even in conversations around, well, how do we manage the manure from the livestock and where does that go? It's a whole different conversation, right? So in many ways, they're looking at different types of resources. They're using biodigesters to capture gas, to convert to energy. They're doing some things that maybe we're not doing as much of here in the US. But when we do talk to them, or when I have talked to them, we have urban farmers in Tokyo and other places are growing crops on the rooftops and thinking about how are we going to continue to be sustainable down the road. And so it is a question, it is a concern, at least in the individuals that I've spoken to when we've been in Japan, and they are working to try to find ways to address it, just in some words we would be.
Yeah, I think obviously us from a U.S. perspective, seeing our farmers, deal with some of these tax credits, that has been a big trying to pin down how we can deal with that in climate smart agriculture. I think if that pressure is kind of coming to us at the U.S. level, it's got to be pinpointing other farmers across the globe. But I feel like for more so like the biofuel space, I talked about one of our farmers, he went over there in June, and they're really trying to encourage the Japanese to, intake ethanol or utilize ethanol in their gasoline supply, and they're just really scratching the surface, whereas us in the United States, E15 is pretty readily available in most spots, so I feel like they're very conscientious as a whole just to make sure that obviously sustainability is a top priority for them, but also for us. So I feel like if we are also getting that pressure on some of our farmers, which is good pressure for us to want to have a sustainable product, I feel like Japanese agriculturalists are having the same type of thing too.
I guess another thing to maybe add is dealing with climate challenges in Japan and in the United States, around the world in different ways. utilizing technology and the importance of that in agriculture. When we talk a lot in terms of seed technology, biotechnology, gene editing, CRISPR technology, and there's ways that we can learn from each other. Japan is very at the forefront of some of those technologies, just as much as the United States is. And together, cooperatively working on finding solutions to whatever challenges we may have. But if we need more resilient crops and those kinds of things to deal with these challenges that might be coming. In some cases, it might be too dry or too hot. In other cases, it might be too wet. And sometimes in Iowa, I feel like we end up being too wet more than we are even too dry. The different challenges that we have to face in Japan with the small land footprint that it has, but still a large population has to embrace those technologies too. And I think that's ways that we can learn from each other, because there's very innovative industries and companies and a lot of innovative research in Japan, just like there's in the U.S.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. We do have a couple more questions. The gentleman in the back.
Howdy, Brooks Reynolds with the Japan Bacon Festival that started because of the Iowa Hog Lift. I guess this question is to Grant. Like, I own a restaurant at the fair. Like, I would like to serve edamame. What percentage of edamame does the Iowa like the people eat, like I said, Japanese restaurants, what percentage of your production goes towards human consumption soybeans?
I'm going to talk about this more from a national perspective, because from a state perspective it is fairly small. But national perspective, you're talking maybe, depending on if you're talking like fully certified organic, or if you're talking just non-biotech, non-GMO, it's probably 5% or less of the total production. It's still is going directly to food when it comes to those kinds of things, like direct protein to food, like tofu and natto and miso. So it's more of a niche. It's a premium market-based opportunity, and so it's a challenge for farmers, because those products typically don't yield as well. So it's a little bit give and take, push pull the market. Some in the market want those products, are willing to pay enough that the farmers can justify the added expense and the lower productivity side of it to grow those products. And so there's some challenges. Probably a bigger epicenter of some of the food grade is actually, we talked about this earlier, actually up in North Dakota. For whatever reason, that tends to be where some of it has migrated a little bit more, and maybe because it's easier to just try to ship to the West Coast and go that way. And also soy production is newer in the North Dakota region. So that's probably part of why we see a little more of the direct food grade soy production, like edamame and some of those things might be more in some of the northern states. But there is a little bit of this in Iowa. I wouldn't say it's edamame necessarily, but it might be food grade soybeans, or clear highland soybeans we talk about that could go into tofu production that can be grown in Iowa. But it's just a couple percent.
How much of that do you export to Japan? Do you know that? Or I guess the Soybean Association of the United States or something?
On the soy food side, most of that would be export, probably to Japan, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, a little bit to the EU, but a lot of it's in South Korea.
You guys could have a booth at the Japan Bacon Festival next April.
There we go.
I'll be there.
All right, we should talk to the U.S. Soybean Export Council folks. We should have them be there. Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. Yes, we have one more question up here in the yellow tie.
Thank you. I'm a little bit curious about tech investment, maybe agri-science research investment, and maybe some of your experiences when you're in Japan. In America, we always look at our land grant systems and our research with the USDA, and are we investing enough when we think about food security as national security? We have economists always develop models that say we're behind how much we're investing in meats or crops. So I'm curious, for those who've traveled to Japan, is tech investment big? Are they growing on that? Is that private or public sector? We see a lot of public sector in America, but we know when you travel to the EU, their extension efforts are very private based, and they have a lot of private partners interested in promoting the industry. So I'm curious, in Japan, if anyone were to know, what does investment in agriculture look like? Is that from the government, or is that private sector funding?
Excellent question. Yeah. Any initial thoughts? agribusiness invest in Japan?
Only what I saw was through government at that time. So, but we also toured a lot of government facilities, so maybe I'm a little bit more biased towards that, but at least talking to the producers directly, I didn't get a sense that it was coming from private industry, that it was more through government support.
Any additional thoughts?
I haven't been to Japan, but from what I've heard from our farmers that have gone over there, they were very, very impressed with maybe not so the production stuff. I didn't get the nooks and crannies of that, but more so seeing the product on the shelves in the marketplace. Very, very pleased with how that all looked. And from pictures I saw, it looked relatively technological. So that's all I've got for that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me too to answer. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I think we're there, we noticed they're at the forefront when it comes to packaging and innovative products, unique products and unique offerings and combinations of how to make food products and the offerings, various offerings and how they go to market to the consumer. That's very unique. But as far as the rest of it goes, I can't answer that for sure. No.
Excellent question. Definitely something to look
Good
into.
question.
Yeah. I think we have one more question up here. Just gentleman in the blue shirt.
Hi, my name is Shigeru Maeda. I'm a farmer in Japan, Northern Ireland. It's like super small size of Iowa. I'm a pretty much country boy. And then taking to Japan and Iowa, I was a university student of Iowa State University back in 27 years ago. So, but anyway, thank you very much for bringing this conversation. Related to Japan and Iowa. Until I'm here, I didn't know that Iowa Box is so large scale to ship to Japan. And I have been eating a lot of pork balls. It's a famous local food in my region. And then, my body must be, made by Iowa pork or Iowa grains anyway. But unfortunately, I think this is just my opinion. Majority of Japanese people don't know about Iowa. I know a lot of it because I'm a farmer. But how about, is there any possibility or is there any certification to attach to Iowa pork to the supermarket? Like you said, it's a bunch of supermarket, on the shelf. It's a lot of products from overseas. So, is there any certification from, this is, product of Iowa or something like? So, in that case, people, we very much recognize to your state, and people start to, familiar with and interested in this state. So, is there any
Question?
Yes. If you go to Tokyo, there is a restaurant in Tokyo called Iowa Barbecue. In the restaurant, they serve Brookwood pork, which is raised in Iowa. And so that's why it's called Iowa Barbecue.
Big Iowa Barbecue.
Big Iowa, sorry, I forgot the big. It's good, it's very good. You eating there?
The owner, Mark Spencer, got he came to Iowa State Fair in 2019, and he loved the fair, and that's when he got the idea to start Big Iowa Barbecue. We worked with Chef Dominic Greiner, who used to be the executive chef at Jethro's, and then Nick Jones, who was the former CEO of Burger.
Yeah.
And there is certification in Japan that says it is Iowa pork. I believe in that, Ambassador Branstad used to be on some working to promote Iowa pork.
Yes, there is some. It's sometimes hard to find though. Like in some of the stores we were in, it's just U.S. pork. And it's next to Spain pork and Japanese pork, and so, yeah, go ahead.
The USWS has a character called Gojubo.
Yes.
And that's their kind of mascot to promote U.S. pork in Japan. Again, you can come next April.
They're great. I have 4 of them, I think, on my desk right now. So, yeah. So, yes, there is some branding. maybe not as much as what we should, but there are some opportunities to try specifically Iowa pork in Japan.
Any other thoughts on market?
Yeah, I mean, USMEF, a big partner that not only Iowa pork, Iowa soybean, Iowa corn, national pork, we utilize in those different markets. And I know specifically, I got a couple pictures of folks that had it. They were in a supermarket and it said like US pork, or it said like Iowa corn, and they were doing like a little butcher chop type thing. So maybe it's not as worldwide as maybe it should be in Japan, but I know in certain niche areas it is, but that is something with USMEF I can poke them about for sure. So, but yeah, the more exposure the better, right?
Yeah, I think mostly what I was going to say, what I've seen is more on the U.S. side of the branding, and that's working through our international livestock export group, the U.S. Meat Export Federation. You know, they have their USMEF logo on a lot of meat products from the U.S. in supermarkets and different places like that. But yeah, I've heard of a few instances of maybe more direct to consumer with the restaurant side, the retail restaurant side might be interested in doing that. Of course, we have a product that we call the Iowa pork chop. And I don't know how that, honestly, I don't know, have you seen that over in Japan? I don't know if they've done that one or not. It may not go in Japan like it does in the US, but that's always, in the US, actually, the Iowa chop that's really well recognized, and you see that all over the place. You know, restaurants in New York City might serve what they call an Iowa chop. So I don't know if that would translate the same and work as well in Japan, but that might be an idea we could try. Bacon does well, we've heard in the back. Everybody likes bacon.
Excellent, excellent. And thank you for your question, very much appreciated. Do we have one more? Okay, we have time for one more question. I apologize, this gentleman right here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very insightful information on all panels. I appreciate that. My name is Kiyo Matsuya. I've been in this state for 30 years. And I still have my family in Japan. I'm looking forward to going back to Japan this year. And this year, it has been very, very weird and a roller coaster year for us and also for everyone. And in terms of the exchange rate, it's having net record low, reached the weak Japanese yen. And also I experienced a very strong yen as well. So I had to go back to Japan when the yen was about 70 yen to the dollar. So then I felt so poor. But I'm looking forward to spending money this year. However, as an exporter, I understand that I had some experience there exporting business. So how you guys are doing that in terms of this year's business, and also I think you have to communicate with your producers as well. And also you have to keep the sustainable the sales. Can you get some advice and insightful information, something that you think?
Great, thank you. If we could keep the responses to this one really brief, we don't have a ton of time, but if anyone has any answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I talked a little bit about it earlier, but we have a surplus in supply of corn for sure, and soybeans as well. So pushing the hot button on, obviously Japan is a very important market to us and one that we know is well established. So being able to utilize that relationship in a more complex fashion, I feel like. So talking about a little bit about the biofuels and stuff like that, if that could be something that potentially is unlocked on a deeper level, that would be something to explore. But obviously, our meat products as well, our soy and corn-fed meat products is of great importance. So we just have a surplus, so we will be looking to get that exported to you in some way, shape, or form.
Any additional thoughts?
I mean, it's about the same thing. Yeah, the industry, the export side, it's very, we're bulk commodities in most cases, and so we're talking about logistically. It's the big shipping companies and big port facilities, and so having more port infrastructure, I think, is going to be important for the U.S. and for Japan for us to export, for them to receive efficiently, and economically, and maybe that's an opportunity to enhance the trade, and both sides can make infrastructure improvements. But you know, it's interesting to see how that all plays into the fact that, like you said, the exchange rates makes a big difference when it comes to affordability and competitiveness of our commodities around the world. You know, in many cases, the Brazilian real has a factor because they're a major supplier of soy, Argentinian peso, the U.S. dollar, and then the currency in the country that is purchasing. You know, we've had a fairly strong U.S. dollar, which hurts us from a U.S. agriculture competitive side of things. So that's a challenge that we've had to deal with, and so I guess we'll just have to see how that shakes out after the election. Right? Maybe things will readjust. The market economy seems to always kind of anticipate what they think might happen after certain elections. So we'll see.
Great, excellent response, and thank you for your question, very much appreciate it. One quick housekeeping note before we close today. As Amy mentioned off the top, this is a road show, so we have stops after this. Our hope is that we go to Texas next. So your opinion on today's session is really valuable to us as we continue to do these. Inside your folder, there's a brief survey. If you do have a couple minutes to fill it out before you leave, we would so appreciate it. You can hand out the filled out survey to my colleague Ahrendsen in the back here, waving his hand. But other than that, we thank you so much for joining our session today. Even though it's a huge topic, as I said, there's still so much to discuss. And I want to thank our panelists for doing so in such a fun background way. So if you would join me in giving our hand to our panelists, that'd be great. Thank you all so much.